Well, hello and good evening, Valerie. My name is Christian. It's nice to meet you. I just want to thank you so much for such an insightful post as this week we look at psychopathology and the Christian faith walk. I just want to thank you for your post. I thought it was very interesting because unlike my post, you kind of had mentioned a little bit about the history and the history of the church with mental illness, and you kind of dabbled in that a little bit, so I thought that was interesting and I appreciated that. I just took some notes here based on what you shared that I found interesting. You talked about the history of Christianity and abnormality, and you kind of mentioned like how back in the day there was they didn't realize it was mental illness. They more so thought it was demons or possession and things like that. So I really appreciated how you talked about how Christianity kind of saw things back then and how they've kind of evolved and see it today. And when you mentioned they even encourage people to seek out mental health professionals when they're struggling with these things. So it's really interesting to see just how things have changed over the course of time. So thank you for sharing that. Another thing you highlighted and stressed, which I thought was super important, was that we must, as Christians, be compassionate, empathetic, and care for the suffering. That's kind of the core values and beliefs in many ways of the Christian faith. And when you had mentioned that, I had thought of a few scriptures, one of them being John chapter 15, verses 12 through 13. And that's going to share, it says, "This is my commandment, love one another as I love you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down their life for one's friends." And that just reminds us that love, above all else, is what we need to be practicing as Christians. That's what God commands of us. I also thought of Matthew chapter 25, verse 40. And in that scripture, I have it here, it shares, in verse 40, it says, "The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'" So that was basically Jesus telling people, when you help out the sick, when you help out the suffering, those in lowly places, you are doing it not towards them, but to Christ himself. So it just reiterates the important point you were trying to make, that we need to come alongside people in their suffering and care for them and be compassionate in the midst of their situation. So I thought that was really interesting. Again, I liked how you you mentioned that churches now encourage people to seek out mental health professionals. And I also like how you dabbled a little bit in what the secular view says, and you gave a definition there. When I looked up the DSM-5 definition, it shared that basically they give a definition about mental illness that says it's a syndrome characterized by clinically significant disturbance in a person's emotions, cognitions, and behaviors. So we understand now with science and over time with research that a lot of mental illness affects these areas, and it won't be possession or won't be demons, but it's just something that the person is dealing with, just like a physical illness, but it's a mental illness. So we just need to come alongside those people and express the love of Christ to them. And I really appreciate you sharing that point. So that's all my notes from your video. I just want to thank you for taking the time to just make a insightful post, and I just wish you the best of luck in your future coursework. So thank you so much, and be blessed.